Morning children, yesterday we had a discussion regarding Mother's Day chapter. Half of the chapter was done. Let's proceed towards the same chapter. Fine. We had done that discussion was going on between the Doris and Krill. Now Annie remarks about her family. Annie remarks that it was high time they grew up. Doris then asked her if they had done something wrong. Annie tells them that it is actually her children's and her husband's behavior that bothered her the most. She is upset just because of her family. They always came, asked for something and went without bothering to know whether she wanted to go out, how she was feeling. She always does her best to keep everybody happy, but all three of them were not bothered about her. Fine. No one took care about her. No one cared for her needs. Annie also remarks that while the three of them do a job of 8 hours a day, with 2 days off at the weekend, she goes on working 7 days round the clock. She wants them that on weekend she will also going to make 2 days off. Doris is really worried about what will happen if mother takes a holiday on weekends. Who will prepare? Who will cook? She warns them that on weekends she needs off. However, Annie assures Doris that she would do some work on Saturday or Sunday only when she is requested for it. And she thanked for whatever she does. She might go up for weekends also, as she was fed up of staying in the house for years together. None of them has ever bothered. No one bothered. Now she will go out also during weekend. If she will have wish and she will be requested, then only she will prepare. George Pearson is shocked at his wife's behavior. Mr. George Pearson now enters the house. He is about 50 years old and considers himself a very important person. He gets annoyed at his wife, who is sipping beer when he enters. He tells her that he doesn't want any tea as he has to go to the club for supper. The wife tells him that she hasn't prepared any tea. At this, George gets annoyed that his wife isn't bothered about him, and he continued to rebuke him, telling him that he is not respected in the society where he keeps going every day. He tells him that people at the bar in the club call him Pompey Pearson due to his self-important behavior. George can't believe what Annie says and confirms the truth from his son Krill. And he tells her son that it does people good to have their feelings hurt. On hearing a knock, Krill checks who is it, reports to Annie that it is Mrs. Fitz at the door. Annie tells him to let her come in. The real Mrs. Annie Pearson returns. Annie Pearson enters and finds Dory in tears. Her family continues to get a scolding in front of her also. Mrs. Fitz informs her that she was putting everyone in their places. She is showing them, who am I? What are their duties? What are their rights? How should they behave with their mother? They should be all should take care of me. When Mrs. George Pearson shouts at his wife, she threatens to slap his big fat silly face. Mrs. Annie Pearson and Mrs. Fitz go back to their original personality. Fine. Then Mrs. Annie Pearson was very much worried how her family is being threatened or scolded. Fine. because she has never raised her pitch, never ever. She was quite innocent, and she carried out all the orders throughout the day. She tells Mrs. Fitz that it's enough. It's enough. Let them change back and get into their true selves. Mrs. Fitz again speaks some magic words. They again get back to their own selves. Mrs. Fitz says she enjoyed every moment in her changed personality. Annie remarks that she didn't enjoy this changeover. Mrs. Fitz wants Annie not to be soft to her family. She wants her to remain firm. Annie says that she'll be able to manage her husband and children now. Mrs. Fitz warns her not to give any apology or explanation, otherwise they'll start threatening her indifferently. She must wear a tough look and talk to them rudely if she wanted them to behave in a right manner. For a change, when Annie smiles, her family members smile back, feel very relaxed as they had cancelled going out. Annie feels that they all as a family should play a game of rummy. She should ask her children to prepare supper for the family, for which they readily agree. She also wanted to have a talk with George, her husband, for which everybody agrees. The play ends on a happy note where children and husband are willing to do whatever Mrs. Annie Pearson suggests. So I'll let you know the highlights of the chapter. The two neighbors, Mrs. Annie Pearson and Mrs. Fitz, discuss Annie's problem. Mrs. Fitz suggests Annie to be the boss in her house and not to meet everyone's demand. Annie agrees that her children should treat her properly. Mrs. Fitz points out that children and husband shouldn't be allowed to treat her as a servant. They also has a right to enjoy herself. Mrs. Fitz suggests that they should temporarily exchange their personalities by using magic spells she has learned in the East. The transformation takes place and the personality of Mrs. Fitz shifts into the body of Mrs. Annie Pearson and vice versa. Mrs. Fitz, now in the body of Annie, stays in Annie's house, sends her to Mrs. Fitz's house. When Doris, daughter of Annie, a pretty girl aged 20, enters the house, she observes her mother playing cards and smoking, which horrifies her. Her mother refuses to make tea for her, iron her yellow silk dress. Doris is surprised at her mother's behavior. After some time, Krill, Mrs. Annie Pearson's son, gets the severe treatment when he inquires about the clothing being put out as has to go again in the evening. Annie continues drinking and both her daughter's son are shocked. They presume that something is certainly wrong with their mother. Annie tells them that they are so engrossed in their own activities they hardly care for her. She also informs them of her intention of not doing any household work on Saturday and Sunday. Mr. George Pearson and his husband comes and finds his daughter crying. He also gets shocked at the wife drinking and totally disapproves it. George is enlightened by Annie that he was laughing stock in his social circle. He tells him that the people call him Pompey. Pearson George goes out in anger. When Krill objects to his mother about behaving badly with the father, he is criticized by his mother. Now the real Annie Mrs. Pearson is the body of Mrs. Fitz returns. George appears and complains about what was happening in the house of Mrs. Fitz. Mrs. Fitz asks George and Doris to leave her and Annie alone for some time, promising that everything was going to be right. When alone, Mrs. Fitz at present Annie chants some mantras, words, and again their personalities get back in their bodies. So after this shock treatment, Annie's family starts giving her mother respect and attention. They also pay attention to her likes and dislikes. But you can take the screenshot of this story, highlight. Fine. This was for today. We will continue tomorrow with the question answers. Thank you. Have a nice day.